Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats, 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not ill-treat them, and the whole time that they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. And your own servants and they will tell you. Therefore, be favourable towards my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.' When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, 'Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?' David's men turned round and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, 'Each of you strap on your sword.' So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, 'David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not ill-treat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields, near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us on the whole time. We were herding our sheep and near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him.' Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, 'Go on ahead, I'll follow you.' But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountainous ravine, there were David and his men descending towards her, and she met them. David had just said, 'It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him.' When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, 'Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. and let this gift, which your servant has brought to my lord, be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment in keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought to him and said, Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then, in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I am your servant, and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were both his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galilee. This is the word of the Lord.
Evening, everybody. Before we begin, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. It's a delight to be able to delve into the stories of lesser-known female characters from the Bible so that we can learn more about their nature and see how we can apply their lessons. It's especially lovely to have this sermon series of women talking about women. Not that a man couldn't preach on Abigail or any of the other ones, but to get a female insight into female character is just brilliant. Whether my insight is particularly brilliant or not is yet to be seen, so just let's see how we get on. In today's passage, we have 3 main characters, Nabal, David, and our heroine, Abigail. Has anybody ever heard of the author Francine Rivers? She's written a great book called A Lineage of Grace. This book is about lesser-known women of the Bible, such as Tamar, Rahab, and others. And I was really, really hoping she'd have written one about Abigail, but she hadn't. But Francine Rivers has a great knack for really setting the scene and the context behind a passage. As you'll know, it can be really tough to grasp the culture and the background of a story, as like in our passage, there are only 44 verses and around 1,200 words. Granted, that's actually quite a big passage, but it's still not a novel. So I thought we could try and set the scene a little before delving into thinking about our main protagonist, Abigail. So let's start with David. He has been in a long battle of wills with Saul, the current king of the southern kingdom, Israel. He has been anointed as king by the prophet Samuel, and he has had the opportunity, not that long ago, to actually kill Saul, incidentally, while Saul was relieving himself in a cave. Instead, David only took the corner of his cloak, to which Saul also exclaimed that one day David would take the throne. But now David is in the wilderness. He has lost his confidant and advisor, the prophet Samuel. David might be struggling a little with remaining faithful that he will actually claim the throne and rule as king. He's been anointed king by Samuel, and the current king is like, yeah, one day you'll probably be king, but David is still not quite there yet. Then there's Nabal, whose name literally means fool. He is a wealthy man, lots of livestock and staff, servants. We're told he's a Calebite, which is a prominent family line. All these attributes should point to him being a well-respected man. However, his name means fool. It's unlikely he garnered much respect or deserved much respect, given he is also described as brutish, brusque, and mean. He's the man of the house, wealthy, and from a prominent family, yet it is Abigail, Nabal's wife, that has the respect and trust of the household. On paper, Abigail's family probably thought a marriage to Nabal was well matched. She likely wouldn't have had a choice, but she was going to a wealthy household with a good family name. It was probable that she could have made a good home there. It appears that she did make a good home there, but that is all despite her husband. Also, for Abigail to have matched with a wealthy husband from a prominent family, it is likely that her background was, for want of a better word, upper class. She is described as intelligent and beautiful, but it appears that beauty is not her most valuable attribute. So, David has been on the outskirts of Nabal's land, and with a 600-strong army behind him, David has inadvertently ended up protecting Nabal's land. Often, travelling forces expected the households and lands that they'd pass through to provide them with sustenance. So David sends an envoy of 10 men, perhaps as a way to show his strength, to ask Nabal for provisions. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Nabal, rather foolishly, not to mention with no regard for the protection of his household men, denies the supplies to David's envoy, whilst also rather brashly insulting the future king. David then, perhaps of his own foolishness and willfulness, immediately calls his men to arms. It occurred to me that it's possible this could have been considered his first act as king. I know he's not quite king yet, but he's like in the crux of it. Seeing as he's so close to winning this battle of wills with Saul, this proposed act of ruthless bloodshed in the name of vengeance and perceived honor would not be a great start to his reign. Neither men had the thought for the protection and safety of innocent people. Both men headstrong and foolhardy, both men speaking without thinking. In stark contrast, we then see Abigail. She has the trust and respect of the household, so much so that a servant turns to her in this moment of crisis for protection. She has the authority to gather the provisions in an instant. She has the intelligence and faith to know the right things to say, and she has the confidence and bravery to approach the future King David and put herself in the line of fire instead of her household. So let's take a look at some of Abigail's characteristics. In the passage, we see Abigail the protector, Abigail the problem solver, and Abigail the peacemaker. These are just three of Abigail's characteristics that I'd like to take a deeper look at with you. So let's see how Abigail protects her household as she embodies bravery and courage. The head of the house, the person that the servants and employees turn to when they need help, should be Nabal. However, Nabal has given them no regard when he refuses David. But one servant knows who to turn to for protection. In the ESV translation, verse 17, the servant says to Abigail, "Consider what you should do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him." The servant turns to Abigail for protection, knowing well that Nabal will not step up for his people. This interaction shows that Abigail is approachable, has the respect of the household, and that the household trusts Abigail to do her utmost to protect them. Perhaps she has protected them from one of Nabal's tirades in the past. Abigail became the de facto head of the house because she takes up the mantle of protector. This is clear from the first thing she says to David in verse 24, but only in the ESV translation. "On me alone be the guilt." She's saying, "Take me instead." She's offering up her life in the place of her household men. Of course, as we see in our next point, her ability as a problem solver prevents her from losing her life. So, Abigail, the problem solver. Quick to action, and her actions are well thought through. She gathers provisions quickly and sends them ahead of her, knowing that David will need appeasing. She hopes this will stop him in his tracks before he and his army make any move against her house. Verse 19 says that she did not tell her husband. This is a brave move, but also shows her quick thinking, knowing that she would not have been able to calm the situation if her husband knew her plan. He may have prevented her from following through. When she meets David, she falls before him, her face bowed to the ground. She shows him deference and shows him the respect due to him as a future king. The first thing she says to David will have made him stop and think. She offers herself in the place of her people. This was bound to give David pause. She uses her intelligence and wisdom to speak to David. She says how her husband is foolish, and if David's men had found her as the de facto head of the house, they would have received the proper welcome. Her intelligence calms David, she solves the problem, and keeps her house safe. After speaking with David and returning home, she finds Nabal drunk and enjoying the festivities. It was sheep shearing time, and so they would have a big party to celebrate sheep shearing. She again uses her wisdom, intelligence, and aptitude for problem solving and knows that this is not the right time to inform Nabal of what had happened. This also shows Abigail's skill as a peacemaker. She makes peace in her home between her husband and her household. She knows not to incite him to anger through fear of repercussions to herself or the servants. She knows when the right time is to tell Nabal what has happened, not just before she goes to David or just after, but the next morning. All in an effort to keep the peace in her home. Furthermore, she acts with diplomacy when she approaches David with the aim of making peace. She is likely aware of the loss of the prophet Samuel, and Abigail appears to have the gift of prophecy. She uses this gift to placate David and restore his faith. Verse 30, Abigail says, "When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord everything good he has promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler." Abigail is reminding David of the Lord's promises to him. Did anyone else notice at the beginning of the passage that it informs us of Samuel's passing? That might be so we can see Abigail as taking over, however briefly, as David's prophetic counsel. We can assume that any good counsel and confidant's aim is to keep the peace. Those are the three things. Being forgotten the first one now. Protector, thank you, well done, you were listening. Protector, a problem solver, and a peacekeeper. These are some of the things we can learn from Abigail. Simple, right? Easy peasy, done, ready to go. I don't know about you, but it doesn't sound very easy to me. How does she do it? How does she remain steadfast, resolute, and strong in her convictions? Well, it can only be by faith. Verse 26, Abigail says, "Since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands." She believes this interaction has been ordained by God. She has faith that she has been moved by God. Verse 32, David says to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord who has sent you today to meet me." David also believed Abigail is acting with God at her side. So yes, these things are hard. It's not easy to stand up for those in need. We can see in history and society just how difficult it is to stand firm, for people to stand firm in their convictions. Like Rosa Parks peacefully protesting segregation, like Minister of International Relations and Cooperations, Naledi Pandor of South Africa, standing up for the lives of people in Palestine. She and their cabinets used their intelligence and diplomacy to raise a charge against Israel. Like Malala Yousafzai, who uses her experience and platform to stand up for women's rights, human rights, and education. We are surrounded by wonderful role models. But we also have the privilege to stand with God. It is God who gives us strength to do what is right. Do you need to make a stand to protect or solve a problem or make peace in some aspect of your life? Is there an area in your life in which you could learn from Abigail? Do you need to ask God for strength and resilience? Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for Abigail, this woman of courage and confidence, for her careful words designed to bring about peace, for her forbearance in a difficult marriage. We pray today for all those who struggle in situations of conflict. Anoint them with wisdom and strength, just as you anointed your servant Abigail. Amen.